Welcome back. I'm going to do a quick album review here for Ariana Grande with Eternal Sunshine. So, for my previous video, if you haven't watched it, it's doing really well numbers-wise, so thank you guys for watching. But this was my first full listen to her Ariana Grande record. Again, I've heard good amount of praise for Thank You Next and Sweetener. I still have to go back and listen to those records. But so I didn't have any kind of expectations or what kind of idea of what the Ariana Grande kind of trademark sound really is. But what I got from this record is I totally understand and totally get why Ariana Grande is in the position that she is in. She is a master with her voice. She knows how to use it so perfectly in so many areas across these tracks. She's able to use it perfectly. The melodies are fantastic. The vocals are undeniably incredible. And the way she is able to master these pop songs, while they may seem pretty structured and pretty run-of-the-mill when it comes to the structure of a typical pop song, the way that Ariana Grande sings and the way that she kind of delivers these vocals makes it still sound so refreshing, and it makes you understand that all of these songs on this record could technically be a hit, especially when it comes to the first half of this record. So all the way down, starting from the intro, all the way down to Yes and, there's definitely hits upon hits upon hits on this record. Bye is probably one of my favorites on the first little bit of it. Bye definitely gives me the vibes of a Dua Lipa kind of sound, where it does sound a little bit more lush in the instrumentation. It sounds a little bit more kind of, not louder per se, but it definitely sounds a lot more lush and a lot more colorful in its production. And the pop hooks, the singing on here is just great, and it's probably one of the best choruses on this entire album. It's just really well crafted, it's really well constructed. Overall, it's just fantastic. Once you kind of get past Yes and, which I still really like, it is growing a little bit tiresome for me, especially considering that we have so many remixes now. Although I'm not even listening to them, just seeing the track being everywhere, it kind of gets a little exhausting, but still, that track is really good. But once you get past Yes and, this album kind of goes into a different territory, which is kind of where you get the most interesting parts of this record. But before that, I like to say Supernatural is another perfect example of a perfect pop song. The bass is a little bit deeper. It sounds a little bit more kind of hip hop inspired, which I know she's done probably. I know she has heard that she has done a couple times on a couple of records. But here, the bass just sounds so deep, and then the production on this thing just sounds so much more kind of, not darker, but it sounds a lot more deeper and a lot more dense. And it allows, when that denseness of this production, it really is a nice contrast with Ariana Grande's especially higher register vocals. And again, these pop hooks are just ear candy. They're perfect. They will get in your head instantly. And Supernatural, I can definitely see being pushed as one of the singles going forward with this record. But again, after once you hit Yes and, I think this album goes in a more interesting direction. And while I can say that the first half of this record is pretty good, it has some amazing pop tracks on it, and I can see myself listening to this in the summertime and it working flawlessly there. There's some parts of this record and some part of me that feels like there needs to be something a little bit deeper to this. And where I get that is I Wish I Hated You, which was more of a more stripped back and more of like a twinkling piano ballad. And the singing on here is a lot more kind of hush to it. But the way that it kind of works is that it just allows the album to kind of have this moment of just this small little silent beauty to it that I feel like the album title and the cover kind of gives off. This is the sound, this song, the sound kind of reminds me of that, where I kind of almost wanted more of it. And you kind of get more of that as well. I believe it's on The Imperfect Woman, The Imperfect Man. I forget the whole title. But then it gets a little bit more interesting there too, where you almost get like this guitar that's like washed in this almost reversed reverb in a way, where the guitar doesn't sound completely right on tune, and it's kind of contorting itself just a tiny bit. But the way that that makes that sound just makes this album, especially in the latter end, just make it a little bit more layered and a little bit more interesting. And I feel like there's more pieces to this record that you may be able to get on deeper listens, especially considering that there is an interlude, I believe it's Saturn something. I'm not the greatest with album titles at the moment, but there's definitely a point on this album. There's definitely a cohesive concept on this album that that probably I'll have to dig deeper into. And overall, I do think this record is pretty good. Again, I consider this as like comfort food kind of music, where it just sounds so professional. It sounds really good. I don't see any tracks that are major flaws, or I don't see anything that is just outright bad. It's just a pop star that knows what they're doing and is executing their sound incredibly well. But there is a part of me that still feels like there's something missing to this record. And while it does feel comfortable and it feels still like really good pop music, I still feel like there wasn't something that was like wowing me to the point it's just like, this is risky, or this is interesting, or this is kind of boundary pushing. I'm not saying that every single record has to do that, but I feel like this record, again, has something that you kind of have to dig deeper to figure out. But I just don't know if musically it's kind of going that far to make me kind of really invested into what is going on. I feel like maybe if you were to give this album a couple of more tracks to kind of flesh out, especially the second half of this record, I feel like you could get something a little bit more wholly satisfying and a little bit more get the idea of what this kind of concept and sound of Eternal Sunshine is. But overall, I still really enjoy this record. There's no major flaws. There's some parts of this record that I do feel like can play a little bit safe, especially kind of towards the first portion. But even still, these are still really good quality pop tracks. So overall, I think I'm probably going to give it... This is really tough. It's kind of... so I'm going to give it... I'll give it a 6.5. It may go up to a 7. I can see it definitely going up to a 7, especially if I give it more listens. I just feel like the pieces are there, but I feel like as a whole album experience, I feel like there's just a little bit that's missing. And while it's great that it's 35 minutes, I do love my trim albums. I feel like there's something here that needed to be explored just a little bit more. Either it was lyrically wise, or whether it was through the production, or whether it was through the whole cohesiveness and the tone of this thing. So that kind of gives you an idea of how I'm feeling on Eternal Sunshine. But let me know what you think of this album in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again very soon.